All my same shtick. Here we go. I got my 3 minutes. It's going perfect. Perfect. This is so good. It's going to stay like this already. That's it. That's the future, man.
Yes.
The light above me is not so good, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Make sure to keep like this, not to move.
Yeah.
Hello? All right. Amazing. I have to keep like That's it. That's not good. Okay.
Yeah. It's okay. Don't worry. It's like shining, Rabbi. It's good.
God shining over here.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Rabbi.
Yes.
Can you make sure before you start to tell everybody to mute their
Yes, I will. Okay.
All right.
I will. Can't I see you?
Yes,
You can't see me?
I can't see Hassan. I don't know why.
I'm here.
I can see him.
I'm shutting down because I'm gonna be moving. Yes.
I can't hear you. That's fine.
Oh.
I can see your mouse moving. I can't hear you.
Yes. I'm gonna hide myself.
Okay, hide yourself. Are we live on YouTube and stuff like that?
Yes, we are already live.
Wow. Okay. All right, Chava, before we press on over here, if everyone can please mute your mics, that would be great. And if you have a question, please unmute it and ask it. I will hear it, and I will, God willing, either ignore it or answer it. Thank you. With the help of Hassan, we are learning Shabbos Daf Yud Zayin. We will now go through the remaining of the Shmoina Asar Davar. We're going to be learning some rules regarding Tumas oil. We're going to be learning some rules regarding Hechsher. We're going to be learning about the concept Gedulei Truma is Truma. We're going to have a little bit of Amira La'akum. We're going to go over the sugya we have in Avodah Zarah, Daf Lamed Hey onwards, of the Isur Midrabanan, to have Piton, Shamnon, Yenom, and B'nai Seihem. All of these are part of the Shmoina Asar. We're going to summarize all, guys. My machine here is not working, so we're going to take a pause. We're going to have to do this again. Danny, I'm sorry. My camera's stuck. Coming right back.
Chika, you have to mute yourself.
Sorry, 1 second.
Just letting you know. We're already not here. You have to be ready to mute yourself once he starts talking.
How do I mute?
Click on the...
Are you on your phone or computer?
Phone.
If you're on your phone, touch the screen. You'll see in the left-hand corner there'll be a microphone that says mute. Just see that?
Yeah.
And then, no, Chika, now you took off your video. All you want, don't do stop video, do mute. Chika, right now you're not muted. You know that, right?
Oh, I hear coffee.
Oh, that's me. Sorry, I'll mute myself now, guys.
Behind Danny.
Rabbi, if you want, I could do the coffee sound in the background just so that we can stay consistent with all the other videos.
Yes, yes. Yeah. Right, that's good. That's good. Well, guys, I'm ready. Take two. Hopefully it's going to work. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Shabbos Daf Yud Zayin. We will be learning the final of the Shmoina Asar Davar. We're going to be learning various rules about Tumas oil. As we will explain, there are 3 types of Tumas oil. We're going to be learning certain interesting details of hechsher that has to happen to all food items to make them susceptible to becoming tamei. We're going to be learning the Rabbanan that gedulei truma, if someone plants truma, even though midai raisa, now that you put it into the ground, that which comes out is chulin, but midai raisa gedulei truma has the status of truma, and furthermore, if you planted truma that's tamei, that which will grow will automatically be truma that's tamei, tahir. We're going to be learning a little bit about Amira La'akum. We're going to be learning that the Isur that we learn in Avodah Zarah, that we may not have Pas Akum, Shemen Akum, that Isur was something that only stood for a while. It was overturned, as we will review by Rabbi Yehuda Nisi'ah, which is the grandson of Rabbeinu HaKadosh, the Isur of Yayin, which stands, the Isur of B'nai Sehen, as we'll repeat what we learned in Avodah Zarah, the Isur of having Yichud with a non-Jewish woman. All of these are part of the Shmoina Asar Davar. We're going to summarize the Shmoina Asar Davar. We're going to point out that according to certain Tanoim, they have a different count. And God willing, on Daf Yud Zayin Amud Beis, we're going to come back to Shabbos. We're going to be learning other activities that begins before Shabbos and whether they are permitted to be done before Shabbos, close to Shabbos, if they will carry over into Shabbos. And we're going to have various arguments between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. We're going to be learning about the concept of Shvisas Kalim, whether that's an Isur Doiraisa as holds Beis Shammai, which means that my utensils may not do work on Shabbos, not me, my utensils. And we're going to touch upon the Isur of Lisha, of kneading, of melabin, of whitening, of tzivia, of dyeing, of tzida, of trapping, and a lot more. Okay, let us start where we left off. We left off on Daf Tez Zayin Amid Beis, 2 lines before the bottom of the Amid. Kind of just quickly recapping, being that this recording fell at the end of last year, that the last topic that we learned about was the Mishnah in Mikvois of Hamaniach Kelim Tachas Atzinor. According to the Tani Rabbi Meir, this is one of the Shmoina Asar Davar, where Beis Hillel basically was overruled, and the halacha is l'chumra like Beis Shammai. However, to remember that according to Rabbi Yossi holds that the din of Hamaniach Kelim Tachas Atzinor was not part of the Shmoina Asar Davar, because he says that machlokes is still standing by machlokes Adayim and Mekayim Oimedes, and Rabbi Yossi, therefore, not to lose that one, adds that B'nai Skutim Nidois Ma'arisosan. To quickly review what that means, is that Midoi Raisa, even if a girl is 1 day old, she was just born, if blood leaves her uterus, and by the way, that's something that happens because the hormones of the mother sometimes goes into the bloodstream of these infants, then Midoi Raisa, she is a Nida. It's not something that common. And that din that even a Tinoikas Bas Yom Echad is subject to the laws of Nida is learned from a limud, from Ve'isha, from the Vav, from the extra Vav in the Torah. And the Kutim did not subscribe to that limud. And therefore, if their daughters would see some dam, they would not render them Nidois. So here, Shmoina Haisavavar, we said that every single B'nai Skutim automatically, from their cribs, Ma'arisasan, they have a status of a Nida. Also based on the concept that we are Hashin. Now, remember that. So in other words, we left off where we counted one of the 18 of putting a water under a pipe, but that is only one according to Rabbi Meir. According to Rabbi Yossi, the one is B'nai Skutim. But as we will see, and we'll speak it out when we get to Amid Beis, that really everyone holds that B'nai Skutim, Nidois Ma'arisasan, is one of the Shmoina Asar Davar. And if that's the case, as we'll see, according to Rav Meir, we won't only have 18, we're going to have 19. We will address all of that when we come to the end of the Sugya before the Mishnah. Okay, so we are up to Daf Tez Zayin on the base, 2 lines before the bottom of the Amid. Okay, V'idach Mahi, what's another of the 18? So here we are quoting the Tanan and Mishnah in a Halos, all behegdim, saying the following words of introduction. Tumas oil means that when there is a corpse, and now listen to the 3 types of oil, which are really all the same, but they're not. Either the corpse goes over something, right? So there's a vertical line connecting the mace. There's no physical contact, but the mace is over an item, or an item or a person goes over a corpse, right? These are 2 types of oil. Both of them mean that there is a vertical connection between the item or the person and the corpse. And then there's a 3rd type of oil, and that is that the oil and the person or the item are not under or over each other at all, but they both share a common roof. Okay? So there's a roof over a corpse and over a person or a thing. That's also called tumas oil. Now, first, a couple of rules. First of all, if any part of me is under such a roof, under such an oil, even only my finger, all of me will become tamei from tumas meis, which means that midoi raisa, I'm tamei for 7 days. I need to have the mechata sprinkled on me in the 3rd and the 7th day, etc. Now, the question is not how much of me or the item has to be under the oil. No minimum amount. Any amount already will become tummy, will bring the tumah to the entirety of the person or the item. Question is, how large does the oil have to be? Meaning, how wide does it have to be? That's the question. Midoi raisa, the oil has to have a tefach of width. And if the oil itself doesn't have a tefach of width, then it's not oil enough to bring the tumah, to convey the tumah from the corpse to the person or item. However, now let's begin the Tanan, that midrabanan, and this will be one of the Shmoina Asar Davar, as we will go into the details. Kol hamekaltal nivim es hatumah, that any roof, even if the roof is not fixed in the ground, it's not part of a building, it's metaltalin, right? It's moving. If that item goes over a corpse and over a person or an item, it will affect tumas oil as long as they have the thickness of a goad. A goad is a stick, is a pole that has a certain ball at the end that is used by farmers in order for them to guide animals. Now the typical thickness of this goad is 1/3 of a tefach. And based on the rules of pi, if something has the thickness of a tefach, if a circle, something circular has the thickness of a tefach, its circumference will be yon tefach, around 3 times that amount. So the Chachamim said that if something only has a third thickness, if it's circular, being that its circumference has a tefach, and people know the din that the oil has to have the width of a tefach. So they said, even if something only has the circumference of a tefach, which is the thickness of a third of that, midrabanan, it has the koyach of bringing tumah. If that same stick, in other words, if I'm carrying the goad, I'm a farmer, and one end of the goad goes over a mace, then I become completely tummy. The goad is not wide a tefach. That's the shmoina aser davar. The circumference is the circumference of a tefach. So says the Chachamim. So say the Chachamim. Now, Amar Rabbi Tarfon hears this, Yud Zayin, and he was very upset. He was upset that he felt that the Torah is being forgotten. And he expressed himself, very strong words, Akapach es banai, oigevalt, that I shall cut off my children. In other words, look inside the top Rashi, Mitztayir ha'yala Torah, ha'mishtakachas. He was in pain that Torah is being forgotten, and umekawal asatzmai. And back inside the top line of Daf Yud Zayin, that shezu halacha mikupachas, this law is cut off. You're saying something and you got it wrong. Sheshama hashemeya, someone heard, but Vitar, he didn't properly understand the meaning of that which he was hearing. Now, what did he hear, says Rab Tarfon, that ho'iker, a farmer, that oiver, if he's walking, Umar da'oi al kseifa, and he has his goad on the shoulder, and the ihel tzidei achas al hakever, and one part, one edge, the tip of this goad, of this stick, went over a kever. A kever has the same din of a mace. So, timu oisai, so he, the person, the carrier, the farmer becomes tamei, mishum kelem hamahilim ala mace. But why does he become tamei, says Rab Tarfon? Not because of some sort of rabbinic addition that it doesn't have to be a tefach, it only has to be a tefach in circumference, even though it doesn't have that width. They never said that. What they said is that there's another din, like we explained. There's 3 types of oils. There's the oil that we're talking about now, that something is covering both the corpse and a person or an item. But then you have the vertical oil, that a person or an item is going directly over a corpse or a kaven, or the kaven is going directly over a person or a corpse. In this vertical type of oil, there is no shiur. So think about it. You have a goad, you have a stick, right, that the farmer is using. The stick, the edge, even only an edge of the stick is going over a kaven. That's vertical tumah. That stick now becomes tamei because the stick was mahil over the mace or over a kaven. So the stick becomes an av. Now, midoiraisa, an av can make a person into a rishon. So what the Chachamim said is, hey, you should know, you farmer, you midoiraisa become a rishon. Now, you don't need to have the 7 clean days, you don't have to have the mechatas, but you have to go to the mikvah, and even after the mikvah, you have to wait until it gets dark for you to be allowed to touch truma, if not, you need the tama truma or kachin. That is what they said. In other words, again, that he becomes tamei mishum kelim hamahilim ala meis as a rishon. But there was no such takanas Chachamim. And Rab Tarfon was really upset that people misunderstood this rule of ho'iker, the oiver umardoi, etc., and they thought that they, so to say, they were more machmed, and they allowed for the oil that is covering both the mace and the person or item, for that not to need the tafach width. And on that, Amar Rabbi Akiva, you know what? Rab Tarfon, you're right, and the Chachamim, you're right. The Chachamim, the Tanach and this Mishnah were right, that there is a rabbinic chumrah, that even something, sometimes that has the circumference of a tefach, it will be viewed as if it has the width of a tefach, and it's going to create the oil, as we are mentioning, not the vertical oil, but an item that is over on one side, a base, and anything under that oil will also become tamei. And on the other hand, Rab Tarfon is also right. And let's read it inside Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva, ani atakin, I'll fix the mistake over here. That shiur, divrei chachamim, that the words of the chachamim of the Tanach will stand. And indeed, that's the way we understand that's what happened. Shiur, kol ha'metalpul v'mivina satuma al ha'adam sh'noi so'isam v'yamardeyam v'latzma mikol shein. First of all, like we mentioned, whenever there is vertical oil, whenever something is going over a kaven, or also if the corpse would be passed over a person or an item, there, no one debates that. There is no minimum shiur needed. any amount of vertical oil will transfer tumas hames. And the al sha'ar adam b'kelim b'poseach tefach. And however, when you're doing this type of oil that you're looking for a covering, it doesn't even have to be affixed to the ground, even the taltalin. But if something is both over a mace and over a person or an item or food, it also transfers tuma. And over there, it has to have the width of a tefach. Now, ve'amar Rabbi Yanai umardeya she'amru ein ba'avav tefach, that there is a rabbinic added chumrah said regarding the goat. And yes, over there, even though this goat doesn't have the thickness of a tefach, but since the yesh behekefei tefach, since its circumference is that of a tefach, like we're explaining, because it's a third, the width is a third of a tefach, the thickness a third, the circumference becomes pi, more or less 3 times that amount. And when there is physical contact, that's the key, between the carrier of this mardoy and the person, there and only there, in other words, like this, being that midoiraisa, if I, the farmer, or whatever, I'm carrying the stick, that stick is touching me. And as we explained, if any part of the other edge of the stick goes over a mace, the stick becomes midoiraisa, as an av, from mace. An av is matama adam, so I midoiraisa become a rishon. When there is already a doiraisa dika level of rishon of tuma, there, yes, the Chazal added the chumrah, oibazoi, you're coming midrabanan directly to masmeis, and midrabanan you have to have the mechatos and the 7 days, etc., etc. In other words, Rabbi Akiva is limiting the area where you make this takonas chachamim. Rabbi Tarfon was right because the chachamim in the Mishnah felt it's always. Rabbi Akiva says no. In most cases, it won't be that way. But when there is physical contact, you have what's going on over here. No, the goat is going over the mace. The goat, I don't care how big it can be, the most skinniest goat. Vertical mace, no minimum share. Av, if it touches me, I become a rishon. Now, touching me doesn't mean it touches my garments. Another detail. It's touching me. It's in my hand. It's on my bare back. When I became a rishon, anyways, midairaisa. Now, yes, the Chazal added this chumrah. Okay. And this chumrah was one of the shmeina aser davar. That in that scenario, when there's physical contact, when the person is a rishon, if the goat has the thickness of a third of a tefach, in other words, if it has the circumference of a tefach, there they said you will become tamei as if it had the width of a tefach itself. That's one of the shmeina aser davar. Now this is Rabbi Akiva's compromise. But in fact, the Gemara, like we had, as we quoted at the end of Daf Tezayin on the days, right? According to Rav Meir, according to Rav Yosi, here we have the same challenge. But all of Rav Tarfon, the Amar HaKapach Hezbanai, Shehalacha Zu, this entire halacha is mikupachas. He disagrees. He holds that there was never such a takana. Oil needs a width of a tefach. And if it doesn't have a width of a tefach, if it's not vertically over or under the mace, it will not create too much oil, not even midrabanan. So Batzralu, who is missing one of the 18. So Amarav Nachman by Yitzchak, here we give the same solution. After Nois Kutim, Nidois Ma'ari Sasan, Vaybayoim Gazu, that he will also subscribe. And again, as really everyone does, that one of the Shmeina Aser Davar is B'nois Kutim, Nidois Ma'ari Sasan, as we explained in our intro. Now, if Rab Tarfon will hold like Rabbi Yosi, this is not a solution. Because if he holds like Rabbi Yosi, he already used the B'nois Kutim, Nidois Ma'ari Sasan, right, to supplement the case of the pipe. But over here, like Rav Meir, he goes like Rav Meir, that the pipe is already one of the Shmeina Aser, putting it under the pipe. Even though, like we mentioned, when he put it, even though it was cloudy, but later the clouds were blown away, and the Besilo felt that the water that comes later is not going to be called Mei She'uven. But that was one of the Shmeina Aser Davar. So therefore, he can use the B'nai Skutim to supplement the case of the Mardei. Beautiful. Moving on, the Idach, what will be the next case? So many of us are already familiarized with the din of Hechsher. Hechsher means that any food item, even if a source of Tumah makes halachic contact, the source of Tumah will not convey Tumah. The food will not acquire Tumah if it wasn't first before Mukhshar lekabel Tumah. It needs to be made susceptible to becoming Tumah. how does a food item become susceptible to becoming tummy? Number one, it has to be disconnected from the ground. Number two, after it's disconnected from the ground, one of the halachic 7 liquids has to wet these items, these food items, and there are details to that it has to be a wetting that the owner knows of and is content of, is satisfied with. And whatever touches the food has to be halachically liquid. Now, don't jump and say, yeah, of course, we know that already. We heard that already. We're going to have a new detail that is normally not spoken about, which will be that there are many times that physically you can have a liquid, one of the 7 liquids, but it's not yet halachically called a liquid at all. And if the liquid is not called a liquid, as we'll explain in a moment, and even if this liquid touches the food is not muksher to become tummy. Okay, so now let's go inside. The idach, what will be the other of the 18? When you are harvesting grapes for the wine press, not to eat, but to put it into a wine press to use it and to make it into wine, Shammai says that even that it's common that when you harvest grapes, some juice of the grapes oozes out and it wets the grapes that it touches. All of those grapes are considered made susceptible to becoming tamei, and that's a chiddush, as we'll speak out in a moment. Hillel says, no, lo yoksha. Then when you are harvesting grapes, legas, even if it got wet, it's not muksher. Now, why would that be? So let's begin by saying that first of all, there was no intent for any juices to leave the grapes, because you want to turn it into grape juice in the wine press, not when you're harvesting it. Number two, not only do you not want it as an unintentional, let's begin by saying that the owner would prefer for no juices to leave it to begin with. He doesn't want it. There's no satisfaction. There's no satisfaction because he wants to use all of the juices for the wine. He doesn't want to lose a drop before it comes into the wine press. That will be the beginning. And therefore, since there is no satisfaction, there is no intention nor satisfaction, lo yoksha. Amalei Hillel l'Shammai. Now, interestingly, this isn't only a machlekes between Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai. This really began with Hillel and Shammai, as we learned above. So Hillel tells Shammai, hold on. According to you, why do you insist that when it comes to harvesting grapes, which is called bitzira, you got to make sure that everything is betara, meaning that the utensils are pure, meaning that since Beis Shammai holds that huchshar, if the utensils that you're using is tamei, then it will become tamei. We're speaking about people who don't want the wine to be tamei. So it says to Shammai, why do you insist for all of the utensils and the people to be betara? Why don't you say the same thing when you harvest olives? Why don't you say the same thing? The ein moiskin betara. Even you are moida that when it comes to olives, there's no need, not for the person nor for the utensils, to be in the state of tara, because even if some of the oil will ooze out of the olives, even with the Shammai, it's unintentional, he's not satisfied with it, and there's no hechsher. Now, the emes is, as Tosfos here points out, that Shammai felt that the physical juice that leaves the olive while you are harvesting it is not similar to the grape juice that leaves the grapes when you harvest grapes. There, the juice of the grapes is bona fide grape juice. By the olives, Tosfos uses the words moihal. It's some sort of watery composition that is not yet as oily as oil becomes when you properly squeeze out the olives. So that's the way Tosfos explains the reason why Shammai held that that's not even called oil. It has to be 7 liquids. One of the 7 liquids is oil. This juice of fruit, this juice of the olive, if it wasn't intentionally squeezed, is like a mepetus. But anyways, Hillel was arguing with Shammai. So Amalei Shammai tells Hillel, listen here, in takniteni, if you're going to continue to provoke me, I'm not going to back down my opinion by the grapes. Adarabba, if you're going to provoke me, I'm going to say that even when you harvest olives, everything has to be tar, because they also become hochsha. Okay, and in other words, but they didn't come to an agreement. Now, so this is already an old machlekes between Shammai and Hillel. Now,
Rabbi, can you clarify this whole concept of you wanting it to become muksher? Like if I have my stuff out in the field and the dew goes on it, and dew is one of the 7 liquids. Is that called I want it? Most people
Very
would
good.
not want it.
Very good, very good. So, okay, so if you remember, we have in Parsha Shemini, the Torah speaks about the shiyutan mayim, even though the Torah speaks about water, but we know from Chazal it goes to all the 7 liquids. The Torah writes the words yutan, yud, taf, nun, and it's pronounced, that's the tradition, yutan. Yutan means you will put. Yutan means yitain. Yutan means if it will go, if passive. Yutan means passive. If it will be put on. Then, being that the Torah doesn't write these letters with the vav, it's written yud taf nun, and it could be read yitain. Yitain means to put it actively. So the question is, do you have to put it, or even if it goes passively? So the compromise that Chazal make is that even if the liquid goes on it without your action, but you have to desire it, you have to be satisfied with it. So let's speak about the case of dew. So we're going to learn this in other times. There are certain products of food that when they are wet, they become better. There are other types of fruits or food that you don't want them to become wet. I'll give you an example. It was very common in the times of Chazal for people to use their roofs during certain months in the year to put out fruit in order for them to become dry, to preserve them for the winter. When you are putting out your fruits for them to become dried, you don't want for dew to go on them because it's going to counter what you desire. That will be a case where even though it becomes wet with the dew, it won't become mukhshar. Other products, the wetter, the fresher, the better. So it really has to do with the desire of the owner. If he is satisfied, then it becomes mukhshar. If he is unsatisfied and he didn't put it, like in the case of the dew, then it won't become mukhshar. So back on side over here. So na'atzu cherev b'reis hamedrash. This is a very strong expression. The Doidos Rishonim writes that this was the way. This was the minhag. Every time there was a vote in the Sanhedrin, and everyone has to give their opinion, they would put a sword in the ground, and they would declare the following. They would always do that. Amru, hanichnas yikanes. If anyone else wants to enter to the group, obviously if they're qualified, they can enter. But but everyone that's here has no permission to leave, because first you have to take a vote. And when this debate was happening, and they were taking account, that day, Shammai himself was arguing so strong to Hillel that Hillel was humbled, and he was sitting there like any other of the Talmidei Shammai. And to describe this image better, as the Hassan Sofer explains, that what happened when we made the Egel. We had Aharon and we had Chur, and they were saying, to the best of their ability, words to inspire the people to back down, but they did not succeed. In other words, the masses overwhelmed Aaron and Chur, that their words and their directives had no effect. So happened this day that Hillel had no effect. Hillel was arguing regarding this din, but no one paid attention to him, or his words were ineffective. And therefore, the Gazer Shammai, and therefore Shammai won. Shammai won the debate. And if Hillel is sitting there as a humbled, so his Talmidim also didn't stand their ground. And what happened? And everyone voted like Shammai, that Huchshar. And being that the majority went in the way of Shammai, so both of them said, Gazer, Shammai, and Hillel, that Oibazoi, from now onwards, if you're harvesting grapes, you got to do everything betara. You have to be tar. Your utensils have to be tar, because if any juice will ooze out, which is something that happens, if there is any tumah here, being that the grapes became mukhshar, they will become tummy. And we are speaking about people who, listen, there's nothing wrong for cholindica grapes or wine to be tummy, but obviously we're speaking about people that were trying to prevent that from happening. Now, ironically, even though Shammai and Hillel themselves made that gezerah, it wasn't yet accepted. But for Asul Talmidayu, but an Oisa Hayim, right? The Talmidim joined, and they made a takana and the Kibluminayu. Now, I'm not clear myself whether this Shammai and Hillel, when they made the gezerah, was it Oisa Hayim? I think not. But like we had before. In other words, this din, interestingly, B'Hashgacha Pratis was already a din in which Shammai and Hillel who debated, Shammai won, but it didn't and therefore Shammai and Hillel were on the same page, but people did not accept it. But Goisa Hayom, that's one of the 18, Gaza Shammai Hillel, tell me Dayokem v'kiblu minayom. And now the question is my Tama. And I'll explain the question, my Tama, based on the following. Liquid, first of all, has two characteristics, as the Rishonim speak out. Number one, right, they themselves are susceptible to Tumah. And number two, they have the power to affect Hechsher. These are two separate dinim. However, these dinim only apply to something that halachically is called a liquid. What does a liquid means? Let's speak about our case, that there is a juice inside the grape. Only if those juices leave the grape l'ratzain of its owner do we consider it liquid. If it doesn't leave l'ratzain, then it itself is not a liquid, midin Torah. That means it itself cannot even become tamei because it's not food nor is it a drink. And obviously, since it's not a liquid, it can be machsher. So now the question is, being that we know this rule, that if a liquid leaves a fruit, if it didn't leave with the satisfaction of the owner, it's not even halachically a liquid. Then why is it that Shammai took that position and ultimately he won and everyone agreed to it? So we have various reasons for this shita. Number one, Amar Zeiri. When we learned this a few daf ago, we gave one of the reasons, but now we're going to learn another one. Amar Zeiri, Amar Rav Chanina, Gezeda, Shema, Yiftzirenu, Bukupet Temeyos. There is really a machlekes Tanoim, which will be, some Tanoim hold that if such a liquid that left the fruit without the ratzain of its owner, if it is in a keli that's tamei, by the very fact that it's gathered in a keli that is tamei, for some reason that's machshivit. These are the words of Rashi. It makes it chashuv because it's gathered in a tamei keli. It's chashuv enough for it to be now be considered a liquid, which becomes tamei and is machsher. And right away, not only will this tamei liquid be machsher, it's also automatically then going to make the grapes tamei as well. All right, as you can see, Rashi, 5 lines, I think, under the Gemara, right, the kupais tameis, the asya tumas hakeli, since this liquid, which is taken not l'ratzain in the world, you would rather it be in the fruit, but since it's in a tamei keli, umachshavalei, Lamashka, it therefore halachically is considered chashav enough to be called a liquid. That's all we need now. First, we need to make it into a halachic liquid. Once it becomes a liquid, it can be machsher. And hoil v'tumasei v'hechsheroi kachas, because since it becomes tamei, it automatically is chashav to be machsher. And once it's machsher, it automatically passes the tumah because the liquid itself is tamei. In other words, and because of that, even when you are not harvesting grapes in a tamei utensil, even if it's a tahar utensil, and in a tahar utensil, we're going now with the concept that since it left the fruit without the desire of the owner, it's halachically midoraisa not even considered a liquid. Midrabanan, it's always considered a liquid, because if it's going to be gathered in a tamei keli, the fact that it's in a tamei keli, that makes it chashuv. Now, the Gemara says not everyone subscribes to that. Not everyone subscribes to the fact that because it's gathered in a tamei keli, that in itself makes the liquid important. Choshev means it renders the mashkin chashuv. It renders into a halachic liquid. Then shaper. Then the reason behind Beis Shammai across the board, even if it's not in a tamei keli, up to tamei keli works. And clay tamei choshev mashkin, just because it's in a tamei keli, who cares? Who cares? You didn't want it to leave. It's not choshev. It's not considered a liquid, and therefore not it can become tamei, nor can it be machsher. So Elo Amar Seiri Amar Rav Chanina Gezeda Shema Yiftzirenu B'Kupais Mizu Fafais. This is what we spoke out. I think it was 2 daf ago, that there will be times that you will harvest your grapes in pitched baskets, in waterproof baskets. You're doing that because you don't want to lose a drop of the grape juice. Now, once you are harvesting the grapes in a utensil that will retain all of the liquid, you don't care if the liquid oozed out of it. You can't say that it's not the l'ratzin of the owners. It is the l'ratzin of the owners. You have to get the liquids out anyway. Now, even though, so the Xera is that if you're going to do it b'kupas mizufafais, then it's chashuv, then you want it to leave, or at least you don't mind that it left, you're satisfied that it left, it's a liquid, and therefore it could be machshir. So the Chazal here, they went ahead and they said, no matter, even if you are harvesting it in non-waterproof containers, a gezerah, it always will be machshir, and therefore it has to be done b'tada. Rava Amar, another reason that gezerah mishum hanoishchois. So Rashi's second line before the bottom of the Amid says gavaldik. There are many times that you have a reading inside the Rashi, yeshkoilois hanoishchois zuazu. You have clusters that are biting into one into the other, and uchshamal hafridam, and you want to separate the grapes or the clusters one from the other. Let's say one cluster and another cluster are wedged one in the other, and when you separate them, it's psikresha. You will squeeze the grapes a bit, enough for some juice to leave. Nischat hamashka aleim. And here says Rashi, the last line of the Amid, even if you don't have waterproof utensils, even though you don't want to waste one drop of liquid, but you do want to separate the clusters. So if you do something biyadayim, even David biyadayim, and you're doing an act at v'layaf right, known as psikresha, even though Rashi doesn't say these words here, but that's the concept. So that's considered enough satisfaction to the owners that it renders that which leaves into a liquid. Once it's a halachic liquid, it's machshar, end of Rashi. And therefore, if you won't harvest the bitara, then you're going to pass the tuma over to the grapes and to the juice. Beautiful. Back in the Gemara. Another reason. There are times that people are going through the vineyards to see whether their grapes are ready to be harvested, whether it's properly ripened or not. And in order to know whether it's ripe or not, that's the way you do it. The night of Eshkelon oven, you take a cluster of grapes, it can still be on the tree, but you take some grapes and you squeeze it, and umizalef al galbi an oven, and when you are in the process of squeezing it, again, you're doing it biyodayim, some of the juice goes and spills or splashes on other grapes. Now, if fruits, food, produce becomes wetted while they are still connected, we don't care. However, ubishas b'tzira, there'll be times that when you come and harvest it, you made a test, the test tells you that the grapes are ripe, so you're going to harvest it shortly after you made that test. Adayin mashka teifeach aleim. The liquid is still wet on them. And since now it's disconnected from the ground, and the liquid that left was something that you took out, so it's considered halachic liquid, now it's mukhshar. And again, if you won't be tar, if the kelim won't be tahirim, if you won't be boisik bitara, then in these circumstances, midoiraisa, those grapes will become tamei. And therefore, Chazal said, that was a Shemona Aser Davar, that no matter when, even if you didn't do this test, the grapes will always become susceptible, no matter when, if some of the juices ooze out of it, and therefore be boitzer tahara. Good. Now, v'idach, what will be another one, another of the 18, turning to Daf Yud Zayin of the days, Amar Tavi Rishba, Amar Shmuel Tavi Rishba. Rashi says Rishba means the hunter, right? And Bachlal, a nun and a reish are letters that are interchangeable, right? Bar, ben. So Nishba means a net. So Tavi, the hunter, says in the name of Shmuel, another Afkiduli Truma Truma. Baby goes through. Midayraisa, if produce of Truma. Tomei or Tar is planted in the ground. Whatever grows from it is considered a new entity, and it's chulin. Now it's tevel, but it's chulin. However, they made Gzeira on that day, no, that if you plant Truma, the produce that grows from it will have the same status as that which you put into the ground. And why did they make that takana? My time, Amar Rab Chanina, Gzeira Mishum, Truma Tohoira Biyad. His answer is that even if you have Truma Tohoira, let's say I have a field and I already separated my Truma, but I didn't yet give it to a Kohen, I'm going to tell myself, why do I have to give it to the Kohen? First of all, I separated the Truma. So whatever remains is no longer Tevel. I separated Truma, I separated my sedition, etc. But it's good. it's Mesukan as far as Truma is concerned. Now, I do have to give the Truma to a Kohen, but I'm going to tell myself, why would I give it to a Kohen? Let me plant it in the ground, and everything that grows out will have a din of Chulin. So I'm going to end up keeping the Truma for me. So that's why they said, no, it won't help you. What the Truma's Truma, so that's going to motivate the Yisrael to give the Truma to the Kohen. So Amar Rava, no, that can't be. If we are to suspect someone will do that, now don't forget, once I separated the Truma, I'm stealing from a Kohen by not giving it to a Kohen. No one, ain't like Torah. There's no specific Kohen that can take me to a Dem Torah because I can give it to any Kohen that I want, but it doesn't belong to me. So if we are Choshed, we made a Gzeira for the people that are Pashat Ganavim, so then such a person wouldn't even separate the Truma. Now, not that he wouldn't separate Truma at all, because Tevel is a tremendous Isur, but we know that Midai Raisa, even one kernel exempts the entire pile from Truma. You don't have to give the suggested 2%, right? 1 out of 40, 1 out of 50, 1 out of 60. So if we're trying to motivate the separator of giving it to the Kohen, and we are afraid that without this takana he'll keep it, no, such a Jew would only separate one kernel, right? As the Gemara says, skipping the parentheses, because since Kivan the Efshel Lamevat Chita Achas, since a person can get rid of the status of Tevel from Truma by only separating one Chita, Mamish, one little grain, and it's plated the whole Kri, Kiddush Shmuel, the Loikavid, and he's not doing that, he's separating 2%, or 1 out of 40, or 1 out of 60, then Hemunim Hemna, then we will trust that he will give it to a Kohen. So that's not the reason for the Zera, Ella, Zera Mishum Truma Tameya. Biyat Kohen, no, the Yid that separates the Truma will give the Truma to the Kohen. But the Kohen that gets it, so if he gets Truma Tahira, as the Hama Shalom al Yisrael. But what happens if the Truma becomes Tamei? Now, Truma Tamei belongs to the Kohen, but the Kohen may not eat it, you must burn it. And even though you can have benefit, that's the way we paskin, from the fuel, you can make breads with the fuel of this burnt Truma, but it has much less value. So the Kohen is going to say to himself, you know what? Why should I burn the Truma? Let me plant it. And whatever grows is Chulin. And not only whatever grows is Chulin, whatever grows is Chulin Tahira. So I'm going to transform Truma into Tara. Oh, and indeed, so who cares if the Kohen does it? It's the Kohen's to do. So the Gemara says, Dilma Mashile Gabe, until he will plant it, he's going to store it somewhere. It's not planting season. And during that time, accidentally, he might come to eat it. So what they said,
Rabbi, but a Kohen is really allowed to do this, right? Could plant it.
Go further. And what did the Chazal say? So they said that when you plant Truma, whatever grows is not Chulin, but they didn't only say that. They said more. They said whatever grows has the same status of that which you planted. Meaning, in the case that you claim you have Truma Tameya, then what will grow will be Truma Tameya. If what's going to grow is going to be Truma Tameya, you're not going to come and plant it. But you should know that also means that if the Kohen plants Truma Tahira, then what grows is Truma Tahira. And indeed, Kohanim can do it. And indeed, there's no downside there. The Truma was given to the Kohen. He's going to plant it. Everything that grows is going to be in the status of Truma. But if what he planted was Tahir, what grows is Tahir, no Takala will come. It's only going to disallow anyone other than a Kohen from partaking from that product.
Not Tahir, Tameh.
If he plants Truma, Tahira, what grows is Tahira. That's what I'm saying.
Right. But if he plants it Tameya,
then it's Tameh. That will circumvent. Very good. Okay. The 2 dots and that you design on the days. It's mamash. It's sad. We're coming to the end of this. The following. If a person is walking with his wallet in his pocket and darkness overtook him, that means it's Shabbos now and you have a wallet in your pocket. So what are your options? The option will be, don't walk at one time, Dalad Amas for the Shosarabin. In other words, walk less than 4 Amas, stop. Then walk less than 4 Amas, stop. And like this, you're not violating carrying. That would be the Doiraisa solution. Now, even if a goy is available, asking a goy to do something for you, an action that you may not do, let's exclude Ben Hashmash's time, but in Shabbos itself, that's something that is also midrabanan. But Chazal said that it's better for you to do Amir La'akum. They were lenient and machmer. They were machmer. They tell you you may not use less than 4 amos, because we all know that. Let's be practical. If I'm going to walk from here to there, and I'm going to tell myself I will never walk 4 amos at one go, it takes one little step to violate the Isur D'Oraisa. Accidentally, I'll take another step, and I'm going to walk to 4 amos or more. So they said you may not walk less than dalad amos. However, at least they were lenient by saying that nois and kiselinach, give it to a goy. And when did they make that chumrah that you may not walk less than dalad amos? But Shus Rabim, Yomi was the day of that gezerah. And why would they make it all together? Why did they make a dispensation from Amir Akum? Because they understood human nature. And if a person has a wallet with their money, with their credit cards, if they're going to be told, even though they know that midoraisa they can carry less than dalad amos, they know that. But we want to be machmer. If you don't give them another solution, then they're not gonna carry, God forbid. But they're not gonna listen to this gezerah. They will carry it less than dalad amos. So in order for them to make sure that people keep the gezerah, don't carry, even though you are deciding to carry less than 4 amos at a time, they at least allowed you to give it to a goy, as we will learn throughout this Masechta, that there are other hetadim, not the way people sometimes out of ignorance use Amir La'akum every Monday and Thursday, but there are many circumstances. There's a chayli, there is a mitzvah, as we'll be learning. Amir La'akum is sometimes permitted, and they found that violating Amir La'akum is better than carrying it less than 4 amos, and that was by Ve'ida Amar Bali. Amar Abimi San Vason. This is a sugya that we will learn extensively in Avodah Zarah, Daf Lamed Hey, Daf Lamed Vav. Pitam, bread that's baked by a goyim, shamnam, oil that's made by goyim, the yenam, wine that's produced by goyim, u'b'noiseyim, and their daughters, as we will better define in a moment, so by heart, marriage to a non-Jewish woman. We spoke this out, I think, at the end of Brachas. Marriage is a Isur D'Oraisa. Not only that, living with a non-Jewish woman on a steady basis, even if you didn't, so to say, marry Be'emes, there's no marriage. That's also an Isur D'Oraisa. Having a one-time relation with a non-Jewish woman, aside of the concept of Kanoim, Toigenboy, V'chulei, you have, as we'll learn in Avodah Zarah, the Beis Din of the Hashmonaim Asert. That was way before the Shemona Aser Davar. So if having a relation with Bnei Seim was already prohibited, either Midoraisa or from the Beis Din of the Hashmonaim, then what's the Bnei Seim? So the Gemara in Avodah Zarah says the Bnei Seim means that they asered even having yichud with a non-Jewish woman. That is the Isur. So these for Pitam, Shamnam, Yemim, Bnei Seim, and Chevra, even though we're saying 4, they're all one. That Kulam, these 4, because they are all connected one to the other. It's about not mingling with them, not socializing with them. There are also issues of kashrus involved, but that's more connected to Bishalakum, according to some opinions, and that's not even mentioned here. But Pitam, Shamnam, Yemim, Ubnei Seim is about not marrying into them. Kulam Yutchas Davar Hein. Now, let's look inside the Rashi, or Hanichal Rav Meir. So many of us are not the Pashat counting with the scoreboard. So now we're going to go through all of the 18. And as we mentioned in the intro, the challenge we will have here is that Rav Meir will also subscribe to that the nois kutim nidois ma'arisoi seyem boy bayim gazru. Everyone holds to that. So now let's go through the 18. So Hanichal Rav Meir, I'm looking inside Rashi, that the manu lahu laha. How do we get to 18? He counts the one the maniach keron tachas atzinor. That was the intro we gave today. The last din we learned yesterday. Havalu yudches. And what are going to be the yudches? So I'm reading inside Rashi. Test the pasli truma. Right, even the Mishnah Nida, a Mishnah in Zavin, it gives you 10 items that midrabanan have enough truma to passel truma. One of them was a din Torah, so we have the 9. And then don't forget that this whole sugya began when the Mishnah said ve'elu. Remember, there was a question whether it's a vav or without a vav, and the Gemara says it's a vav because this is a hemshech to the Mishnah Daf Yud Aleph. What did we learn in the Mishnah Daf Yud Aleph? It's, I don't know why, but Rashi goes out of the order. That the ein koiden, you can't read Friday night to a candlelight, nor the ein poilin, nor can you delouse the garment to candlelight. even if you hold that the lousing the garment on Shabbos is permitted, and even according to the ones that hold you can kill a louse on Shabbos, as we learned, because to the naked eye, they don't look like they're part of an oven. But you may not do it to candlelight, so that's 2. So we're up to 11. So how much are we missing from the 18? Now she says, Pashul Zayin. So you're missing 7. So what are the 7? So Tzinor, Virameir, right, putting the bucket under the pipe in certain circumstances that were machmer like Shammai, like Bei Shammai, and we hold that what? We hold that this becomes Mayim Shulvin. Umarbeya is the first thing we learned today, right in the bottom of the Amid. The goat, even though it doesn't have a width of a tefach, at least when it touches the body or touches my hand, it touches me, and midoiraisa amarishain, then midrabanan I become an av. And an av means that midrabanan I need to undergo all the 7 days, and I have to get the sprinklings of the mechatas. Ubenais kutim, see, everyone subscribes to the benais kutim. So that's number 3. We're going to 3 of the 7. Uboitzer, right, the grapes, they have to be done. You have to harvest grapes pitaro. Number 5, gedulei truma, have the same status of what you planted. And the nois and kisoy, giving your wallet to a goy, not carrying something, toich daladamas, that's number 6. And pitam, v'shamnam, etc., that's number 7, chada, gavaldik. So that's the 18. So let's go back in the Gemara. So let me find the place that we have the 18. Rabbi Yosi, but according to Rabbi Yosi, Shabsei Havin is only 17. Yeah, Shkoyach that you said that he can have the Benois Kutim, but you took out the case of the Tzinoid, because according to Rabbi Yosi, Tzir, the case of the Tzinoid, they still argue. They still argue. That means it wasn't resolved in that attic. The answer is the Gemara. There's another one. That we're going through first the ones that we just mentioned in Avodah Zarah. There's a hierarchy that more problematic is having oil from Goyim. Less problematic is having bread baked by Goyim, but since they don't want us to have oil, so they added you can't have bread. Now, why is oil more important not having from the Goyim more than the bread? The Gemara is going to ask in a moment. Likewise, Va'al Shamnam, oil was decreed to prevent us of having wine. Now that we all understand that drinking wine from Goyim, which can lead to drinking wine with Goyim, not only are we socializing with them, but we're socializing with them through drinking an alcoholic beverage. That brings even a greater amount of closeness, and that's completely out. And now, so the Gemara interrupts. Why? Why is one more? The shaman. Why is shaman more strict and more problematic than bread? Elam, you're right. Gozelu al pitam vishamnam. Bread and oil were both together prohibited midrabanan to prevent us from not having wine with them. And truth be told, as we learn in Avodah Zarah, that from these everything that we are mentioning, both bread and oil changed. Oil was completely outruled. And nowadays, there's no isur having, as long as the ingredients are kosher, but there's no such a thing as shem and akum. However, when it comes to bread, even though, like the Gemara says in Avodah Zarah, that the rule is that once a bezin makes a takana, ein bezin acher yachol to overrule it, elam kein gadol himenu b'minyan b'chachma b'minyan. And that never happened. There was never a gathering with more chachma and minyan as this gezerah. But since it was not, the bread was not accepted by everyone, that goes to the oil. The oil was not accepted by everyone. So therefore, Rabbi Yehuda Nisiyah convened the Beis Din, and he took away the Isur of Shemen. When it comes to bread, here we have a whole discussion, whether bread is enforced as much as the other takanas, and halachically there are more leniencies when it comes to bread than wine, for example. Which is why if a person halachically lives in a place where he doesn't have access to pas Yisrael, he may never have pas that's baked by a private guy, but there are times when one halachically could be lenient when it comes to what's called pas palted, as we learned in Avodah Zarah. I'm not suggesting that people should follow that because it's good to go beyond the letter of the law, but just to point out that Shemin was completely uprooted, pas is more limited, and these two were the least important. And they were enacted to prevent us from having wine made by Goy. When it comes to a wine, there is no halachic leniency at all, even if it's not made by a Goy individually, if it's made by a company. And even when we know there is no hashash nowadays that a company made it for Avodah Zarah, yain stam is also. And so wine is the most important. The Aliyah and yain itself was put into place, mishum b'nesayim. was to make sure that we don't have, like we mentioned, yichud with their daughters. And why did they decree that we may not even have yichud with their daughters? Mishum davar acher, to prevent us from worshiping Avodah Zarah. As we have in the Torah, the tragedy that happened by Bnei Ismaya, that not only was there a sinus, but that led to Avodah Zarah. And now all of this was mentioned already, because we said that Pitam and Shamnam and Yeinam and Bnei Sayam are counted as one. But now we're learning the other one. And according to Rabbi Yossi, this is the 18th. And there's something completely else. Something else completely. There's something else that they prohibited. And why did they prohibit that? Because of something else. So it's a little bit hidden. So obviously there was a time that they were not willing, because of a censor, to say what they're talking about. But now we can spill the beans. What was this issur? Amar Rav Nachman by Yitzchak goes through the made a decree. Al tinuk nachi, that even an infant, a non-Jewish child, has the status shemetame biziva. He has the status of a zav, which is a very high level of av. There's an av that conveys tumah and making whatever it touches a rishon. A zav is someone that sometimes he conveys tumah on the same level as himself. If a zav sits or lays on something that's meant to be sat or laid upon, even if there's no direct contact, even if there's 10 mattresses one under the other, they all become an av. So it's a very strong tumah. People stay away from a zav if they want to stay betara, as all the Yidden want to stay betara. And why did they decree that even an infant child has a non-Jew has the status of a zav? Because of davar acher, which means to prevent our children playing playmates with non-Jewish children, because of the mishkav zachor, to prevent acts of homosexuality that might happen between the non-Jewish child and the Jewish child. And this is the 18th. And the Gemara is going with the premise that Rav Meir also subscribes to this one. This was also enacted in that attic, Aliyah's Rav Hananya. So he fragt the Gemara, Rav Meir, Nami, the Shasrei have. Now we have 19. We have the 18 of above plus the davar acher mishum davar acher. And indeed, we have the davar acher mishum davar acher. So here the Gemara answers, when we learned in the Mishnah of Zavin, the 9th and the 10th, the last two was that if you have mashkin is matama oichlin and kalim, and as the Gemara spoke out the details, that these are cases where midoy raisa it would not convey tumah, and we counted them as two. Rav Meir counts these two as one. So everyone subscribes to all of the takanas. There is no debate what were the shmeina asar. Ultimately, it boils down whether two of them are counted as two or these two are counted as one. And here we have the shmeina asar davar. So we have a zasiyum on the sugya, and now let us begin the Mishnah. So as we mentioned, we already had in the Mishnah Daf Yud Aleph, right, that a tailor cannot go out with his kalim samuch l'chashecha because he might inadvertently carry it on Shabbos. And now we're going to go further. There's going to be many arguments between Beis Shammai and Beisil. We're going to learn some of them, all right, where Beis Shammai is machmir, and he disallows certain activities to happen, again, shortly before Shabbos, because live Beis Shammai, that might or that will lead into a chilul Shabbos. Beis Shammai Yomim, case number 1, machlokes number 1. Ein shoyrim diyoyim. One may not soak ink, and the samanim dies, right? Or en kashinim vetch. These are items that, if they are properly soaked in liquid, you are violating the malacha of kneading, known as lisha, because you are taking two separate entities, right? The ingredients of the dye and the water, the ingredients of the ink and the water, the water and the vetch, and they're becoming one mass. They're kneaded together. Lisha. Now, lisha may not be done on the day of Shabbos. Here, a person is putting them in the vat before Shabbos. But Beis Shammai is of the opinion, and this will affect the next all of the first three arguments of the Mishnah, that's called that Shvisas Kalim is Asun Midoraisa. When God told me to rest on Shabbos, this mitzvah is not only on me, but my utensils also must rest. So even if I did something before Shabbos, but I'm doing something in my utensils, and that will continue into Shabbos, so there is an act of kneading happening on Shabbos Kodesh. Beis Shammai, I'm violating an Isur D'Oraisa. Shvisas Kalim. So therefore he says, Ein shoyrim diyoyim v'samanim kashinim, ela kedei sheyishoyrim v'void yoyim. You have to make sure that they can completely soak up before Shabbos comes in. In other words, it's already a proper bona fide ink or dye, or the vetch are ready as they are now, already before Shabbos to be fed to animals. Vetch is a certain animal food made with a certain bean called kashinim, and you have to make sure, however, Beis Hillel does not subscribe to Shvisas Kelim, and therefore I may not do it on Shabbos, because Lisha. But as long as I put it in my vat before Shabbos, I'm allowed to do it. Beis Hillel Matirim, right? Look inside the Rashi. Mishenasan as hamayim iboyoy. You have to put the waters in before. But as long as you put everything into motion before, the fact that it's happening during Beis Hillel is not problematic. Don't confuse this with cooking. Cooking has another whole chumrah of that you might stoke the coals, as we'll learn when we come to cooking. But this is non-food items. Now, machlokes number 2, which has the same underlying question. You may not put bundles of flax of pishtan inside a oven. Now, the issue here is that when you put these bundles of flax, because of them getting heated, they would become bleached. And bleaching is the malacha of melabain, whitening. Now here, this is a bigger chiddush. It's not automatically included in the first argument, because here you are already putting it into an oven. And like we mentioned, l'kula alma, when it comes to cooking, even Beis Hillel is maida, that there are many restrictions of what you may put on the fire before Shabbos, because you might stoke the coals. So the chiddush here is that even Beis Hillel, who doesn't allow you to cook, as we'll be learning in the third Perikira, here there's no problem because you're not cooking it. Yeah, you're putting it in the oven, but no one stokes the coals when it comes to bettering the bleaching process. You leave it the way it is, so there's no hashash. So only Beis Shammai that subscribes to Shvisas Kelim is an Isser Daraisa says, but we're learning that you may not put the bundles of flax inside the oven, unless they become fully bleached before Shabbos. Likewise, you may not put wool into a vat which is over the fire, unless it's going to fully dye. You'll achieve your goal before Shabbos. And the chiddush here is that Beis Hillel is matir even though there's fire involved. Also based on the fact that he doesn't subscribe to Shvisas Kelim, as we'll learn in the Gemara. Let's chaparayim one more, and then we'll go weiter. The third is, you may not set out traps, spread out traps, to trap non-domesticated animals, birds or fish, from before Shabbos, only if you're putting it out in a place where, being that there's an abundance of fish, you certainly will fill up your net before Shabbos. In other words, by the laws of nature, by the laws of probability, it's going to be fully trapped from before Shabbos, and there will be no room in these nets for something new to come in during Shabbos. And Beis Hillel is matir, and as the Rishonim speak out, we're not repeating the same concept, even though it's all based on the question whether Shvisas Kelim is an Isur or not. But here, the way a trap works, the trap closes in on them. And therefore, your Kelim are active. In the first 2 cases of the Mishnah, your Kelim were passive. So if Beis Hillel only would have opined that you are allowed to do it, one might have thought that if your utensils are actively doing something, then he might prohibit it. So comes the third case, even if your Kelim are active, it's a trap, the trap will close. I don't care if that happens on Shabbos. As long as you did not lay them on Shabbos, if you set them out, if you spread them out from before Shabbos, so you are allowed to do it. We'll stop over here, God willing, tomorrow to continue the 4th machlokes that we will have in this Mishnah.
Chazaku Baruch.
Rabbi.
Good.
Rabbi.
Shkoyach.
Rabbi.
Yes.
Quick question here on this whole trapping and it's all the same concept, right? Of Kelim working on Shabbos.
We have non-fire involved, fire involved, active.
Fire involved. So the
Rabbi.
Yeah.
I also have a question on the previous thing. So is the whole point of this thing that we don't do bread because of the oil, we don't do oil because of the wine, we don't do wine because of
we don't do bread and oil because of the wine.
But then we don't do wine because of the daughters, and we don't do the daughters because of Avodah Zarah, and then we don't do Avodah Zarah because of...
And then there's another din, but they were afraid to say it because we're basically claiming here that we suspect that non-Jews practice more homosexuality than Jews. And that's something that at certain times would cause a backlash, so we hid that takana. But the takana is that we don't allow social interaction between Jewish and non-Jewish children, for non-Jewish children not to be participants in any homosexuality.
But that's related to the daughters in what way?
No, it's not related. Not related. So that's the other one. That's the final one. That's the 18th one.
So basically, adults should not fraternize because they might drink wine and end up being together, and the kids should not fraternize because they might commit sodomy.
Without the wine, yeah, they'll be together. There you go. Practice social distancing.
Mamish, fascinating stuff. Gemara did not believe in shiksas are for practice. That is not
Danny, cut that out. That's not. We shouldn't be online with that.
No, that's not on YouTube. We're not on YouTube.
Yes, it is. Danny, are we on YouTube?
We are, but I'm gonna add it to this later.
Thank you. All right.
Hello. You gotta be able to have some conversation afterwards that are not on YouTube. Hello.
Have a good day, Chavra.
Have a good day.
All right, guys. Yom Tov.
Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.